What's up, everybody? Welcome into Group Chat Football Live. I'm Peter Ariz alongside D Money, and this is our daily college football show where we talk transfer portal, recruiting news, coaching news, and we've got a little bit of everything today on our show. All that stuff and much more. D, good afternoon. We're starting a little bit later than usual, so welcome into the show, everybody. Appreciate you all for joining us today. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But we thought the news was slowing down a little bit, and today a whole bunch of stuff has happened.
Yeah, you talk about high school, college, coaching, all the stuff that we kind of try to focus on here at Group Chat Football Live. You get a little bit of everything today, and then we're getting right into spring practice. We're only about maybe 6 weeks away from teams starting to practice and hit, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Still some moves to be made. You see with Notre Dame, some of these playoff teams, there's still some action there. So we'll see a trickle of portal here, a lot of recruiting, finishing up coaching staffs, and then getting ready for spring football.
Of course, though, we'll start with Bill Belichick and the news of the day, as there's news every day with North Carolina football, right? But he's officially signed his contract with North Carolina. And this was a big story a couple weeks ago when it first came out that he hadn't officially signed, considering, of course, we are in the middle of NFL hiring season for head coaches. And Belichick, his name's just always going to pop up when it comes to NFL job openings. So he's signed the deal now. That speculation can go out the window, but let's talk about the buyout, which it drops from $10 million right now. So if an NFL team wanted to come in right now and hire him, they'd have to pay $10 million to, in June 2025, June 1st, it then becomes a $1 million buyout, which obviously way more reasonable, but there's not hiring going on there in June. So what do you make of the timing of that buyout and your overall thoughts with the deal? Again, for those of you who are unaware, D-Money he's an attorney as well, so he can speak on this sort of stuff very fluently.
Yeah, look, I think it's just going down to basic common sense and timing. You see the June date. There's not going to be an NFL job, barring some weird scandal or something, where an NFL head coaching job comes available after that buyout drops. So that basically takes Bill Belichick off the coaching market for this coaching cycle in the NFL, guaranteeing him at least 1 year as North Carolina's head coach, unless somebody wants to pay $10 million here in the next few days. There was a lot of talk about this contract not being official because there was people saying, well, maybe he's just trying to get out of that $10 million buyout, not make it official, just operate off the term sheet that would have less enforceability potentially, and then go to the NFL. That's obviously all been put to bed. He's been hiring staff. When he didn't hire staff initially, that some people said there might have been a delay because he's waiting for the NFL. He's been hiring staff. We've been reporting on that every day on Group Chat Sports. He's getting a lot of great players in the portal. In the high school class, 26, particularly at the defensive back position, he's been adding players, adding 25 players as well, talking about quarterbacks. So we've gone over all this on Group Chat Football Live, but all that action just led up to making it official here. He's acting like he's going to be around for a while, and he is showing that now with this contract being official. And there's a lot of interesting incentives, Pete. I mean, you look at the win bonus. Starts at 8 games. So 8 games from the way this contract's written would be a pretty good season for Bill Belichick. Because he wins 8 games, that's when the bonuses kick in. He gets $150,000. And that escalates $50,000 for each win, all the way up to 12 games, which is $350,000 as a bonus. There's also a bowl component, which is interesting. You make a bowl game, you get $150,000. You make Pop-Tart Bowl, Tax Slayer, Gator Bowl, the Duke Mayo Bowl, some of the higher level ACC bowls, you get $350,000. And then the rest goes college football playoff, starting at $750,000 bonus, all the way up to $1.75 million if you win the whole enchilada. There's also bonuses related to polls, and these are pretty big as well, which starting at $250,000 for the top 25, all the way up to $500,000 for the top 5. There's Coach of the Year bonuses. And then to me, very interesting, and in keeping with North Carolina's reputation as an excellent academic school, you have bonuses for team GPA and academic progress rate. Team GPA over 2.7, $50,000. That keeps going up. Over 3.0, that's a $150,000 bonus for Bill Belichick. This is something new to him, right? This is his first time where he has to actually care about the player's academic performance. So this is part of the transition from pro to college. APR, similar. If it's over 950, 100,000, over 1,000, 200,000. So public university, North Carolina. So the contract's no secret. Very interesting to dive into some of the details.
I guess the question becomes, and this is very speculative. A year from now, North Carolina has a solid season. Let's say it is an 8 to 9 win season, maybe more than that, and maybe he's really liking it there at North Carolina. And look, there may be some teams that come calling, but is there like a restructure that then increases the buyout again if you're North Carolina? I mean, how do you see that potentially playing out down the line in a hypothetical world?
I mean, look, you got to see how this thing plays out, right? So I think this is very much a wait and see mode. He's not getting any younger. He's going to learn what he likes about college. He thinks he knows about college coaching, but he hasn't done it, right? So a full cycle of recruiting, of keeping this college schedule, of dealing with the kids, of seeing how he's able to impact winning with these kids and develop them. I think he'll have a whole different perspective on the sport, good or bad, by the end of the year. And he'll know exactly what he wants to do. He'll either say, man, I love this. I want to be here as long as I can. Let's structure this so I can get paid more while I'm here. You don't have to worry about me leaving, or let me figure out how I can get out of here. He'll know pretty quick, I think, just because the recruiting, the portal, all this stuff is so unique that he's going to get a feel for how different it is from the NFL.
Without a doubt. Now, looking at a program here that has been very tied to North Carolina, been a lot of movement, staff movement. There's been some players coming over as well, and that's Washington. They made a big move here on the offensive side of the ball as Amari Evans, transfer from Penn State. He was the team's third leading receiver. Harrison Wallace and Tyler Warren were ahead of him there. But Washington losing Jonte Cook pretty much right as he stepped on campus, you were expecting him to be a premier player in your offense. If you're Washington, not sure they're the same type of receiver, not sure that's like the similar players, but nonetheless, you're getting a guy who's going to eat up a lot of targets you'd expect in this offense next season.
Both speed guys, talk about Cook and Evans. Cook may be more your tightly wound, explosive guy. You get him a short pass and he's going to explode. Evans is your classic deep threat. The ball is in the air over distance and he runs under it. You saw that in the bowl game. Talk about Washington's bowl game. Giles Jackson was catching a ton of deep balls from Damon Williams, your young quarterback who you are building around at Washington. Giles Jackson moving on. He's been in college forever. Denzel Boston comes back, one of the better receivers in the country in the Big Ten. You're excited about him, but there wasn't much coming up, behind him as far as younger players that you could say this guy's going to help Damon Williams take that next step. Jonte Cook came and went, disciplinary issues, fit issues. It just didn't work out with him. Luckily for Washington, because of the playoff and this kind of staggered portal schedule, a receiver came on the market from a playoff team in Penn State with that extra 5 days to enter the portal that fits what you need. And that is a deep threat receiver for Damon Williams to replace some of what you saw, particularly in that bowl game from Giles Jackson. You look at the stats, 21 catches, which is not a lot of catches. Penn State famously didn't hit a receiver for a catch in the semifinal where they were eliminated. But 21 catches, 415 yards, 5 touchdowns. You saw him go deep against Boise State in the playoff. Here's the key stat, 19.8 yards per catch. This, again, pure deep threat. You go a little deeper on the stats according to Pro Football Focus. His average depth of target was 20.8 yards. So similar to his yards per catch. They're throwing it to him 20-plus yards down the field. Had a 59-yard touchdown against Kent State, the longest reception of the year for a Penn State receiver. Did pretty good with the contested catches, 80%, but again, the volume was low. So
yeah, there was speculation that he felt like he was being used as a decoy too much in the Penn State offense.
Yeah, and look, Penn State is an interesting team because they had a lot of success and they had this huge hole of receiver, but yet you look at their receivers, they landed at pretty good spots. Amari Evans going to Washington, Harrison Wallace on his way to Ole Miss, the top two guys. So, how much of it was your quarterback, who you think is a pretty good quarterback? He's a projected first-round pick. How much is your offensive coordinator? Again, you think you have a pretty good offensive coordinator coming from Kansas. and how much is this the receivers and they're not being up to par? It's probably a little bit of all these things. You had two great running backs, both of whom come back. You want to focus on the running game. Your tight end's the best tight end in the nation, going to be potentially a top 10 type pick, top 15 type pick. So there are a lot of factors as to why the receivers didn't do as well here. Obviously, Ole Miss knows how to throw the ball, and they're taking Harrison Wallace. And Washington, in terms of receiver tradition, it's hard to get much better. Just look at some of the names of recent years: Roma Dunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, all those guys, day one, day two picks. Giles Jackson, who I mentioned, the veteran receiver, had a really nice finish to last year. And then Denzel Boston, really nice young player who will be going next to Amari Evans, really emerging type of guy. And this could be an emerging duo in the Big Ten with a quarterback in Damon Williams, who now you've seen him in the bowl game. You've seen him in spot duty. You've seen him really show what he can do. He is a dynamic, exciting player. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he can throw the ball down the field. Of course, he is very mobile. And I think if you're Washington, you're saying we're probably going to have this guy for maybe 4 years because he's not the prototype NFL kind of guy. If we can keep him and keep him productive, we're going to have a player that we can build around and give us stability in this conference. So it would be interesting to see what happens this year with this receiving core. But I think this is all about Damon Williams and giving him what he needs to make throws to all levels of the field. Amari Evans taking care of that deep part.
Well, and look, not to make this just a comparison between Jonte Cook and Amari Evans, but if you're Washington, of course, Cook was a big ticket item in the portal. He definitely wasn't going to be cheap. He had big suitors. Other schools, Florida, thought they were going to get him for a while there, and we understand Florida has been spending a good amount of money to try to build around DJ Lagway as well. But Cook leaves, and he's a guy who only had 16 career catches in 2 seasons. So yes, if you're a Huskies fan, you're like, man, that was quick. Something obviously didn't work out there, as we touched on the show when he was dismissed from the team or left the team, whatever you want to call it. But you're replacing him. Again, it's tough to replace him. That wasn't really there, but theoretically he slides into the spot as a guy who was the 3rd leading receiver on a semifinal team this year.
Yeah, look, just going back to the specs, 6 foot, 189. He plays in states in the long jump in Texas. He's from Killeen, Texas. Quarterback, cornerback in high school. So really more of an athlete, explosive athlete who's become a receiver and is still developing. So there might be some more upside there just from a developmental standpoint as he gets into that last year of college. But at a minimum, when Damon Williams drops back and is looking for that deep ball, he's got Amari Evans.
Now, to me, this is the story of the day, the story of the last couple of days here in the transfer portal, and that is Notre Dame and what's going on with their offensive line room. Just played in the national championship. We've mentioned how with the playoffs, these teams have a few days here buffer to enter. And man, you are now, if you're a Notre Dame fan, losing 3 guys in the last 24 hours plus here that were big parts of your offensive line. You're going into next season playing Miami early in the year, right? So you're going to be playing a team that, as we understand, Miami is going to be a top 20 type team consensus by most people's estimate. And you're going to have what looks like a completely different offensive line. And we'll get into each of these guys individually. There was a good amount of shuffling on this line in terms of guys beating each other out and coming back and taking jobs from different people. But again, 3 guys here in Pat Coogan, center, Rocco Spindler, and then yesterday Sam Pendleton, who's now getting crystal balls to Tennessee.
Yeah, so it's like musical chairs with this offensive line in a lot of ways. First of all, one of the most talented deep offensive lines in the country. You saw that this year with all the injuries they had and still being able to field a strong unit that was really central to what they did on offense. But what you saw here, again, I mentioned musical chairs. There's 5 spots, right? So starting with a guy like Sam Pendleton, who we talked about yesterday, right? Sam Pendleton entered the portal. He's now being projected to go to Tennessee. Pendleton won the guard job in camp. That was a little bit unexpected. And that ended up moving Pat Coogan, who was the previous starter at guard, to center, initially a backup. He ended up starting. We'll talk about that in a second. Rocco Spindler did not start, was behind Billy Schroth, and then came and took that spot when Billy Schroth hurt his ankle. So there was a lot of movement here, and all these pieces sort of affected each other. What you're seeing consistently with Pendleton, who, again, we talked about him yesterday, he's now projected to go to Tennessee. Rocco Spindler, starting offensive guard, really tough player. We'll get into him in a second. And Pat Coogan, the center, is that all three of those guys were not guaranteed starters, but started a lot of games. With Pendleton, he started off as a starter and then was taken out of the starting lineup. With Spindler and with Coogan, they were initially beaten out and then eventually got back in the lineup because of injuries and stayed there. So that's all that. That's why when I say musical chairs, I mean all these guys were moving around. Notre Dame's offensive line incredibly deep. But all three of these players, we talked about Pendleton yesterday, powerful knockback power. I think he fits well at Tennessee if that is where he ends up. All these guys to me are high major priority portal targets. This is January 23rd, and you can potentially get a playoff caliber offensive lineman with experience and toughness and coaching to plug right into your lineup. There is going to be a long list of teams trying to get these players. Let's start with Rocco Spindler, 6'5", 325 pounds, from Detroit, Michigan. He was the number 660 overall player in the 247 composite class of 2021. Wrestling background. His father, Mark, was a top recruit in the country, played for Pittsburgh Panthers, third-round pick of the Detroit Lions. That's why Spindler's from Detroit. Played 9 years in the NFL. Spindler's got a lot of experience, redshirt senior next year, played all 60 games this year for the Irish, started 13 of them. Like we mentioned, he finished as a starter, played every snap of the win over Georgia, for example. So when, like I mentioned, he lost his job in camp. Billy Schroth gets hurt. Spindler steps in, and then when Schroth came back to play, he actually took Pendleton's job, who is now transferring potentially to Tennessee. So that's how the whole thing shuffled. You wonder, why is Spindler going into the portal as a returning starter? You got Charles Jagasaw, who played a little tackle this year. Really exciting prospect for Notre Dame. A lot of people think he could be a big-time NFL kind of guy, particularly if he moves inside. You could see him going inside. Gerby Lambert, a guy that's very talented outside of tackle, a young player. Maybe he stays out there. Anthony Knapp, who played tackle during this playoff run. Could he potentially land on the inside for his future, another young player? So there's a lot of really talented young guys, which is why Spindler's spot was not guaranteed. But I watched him against Louisville, really focus on that tape this morning or once he entered the portal. Right guard, brawler, very good in a phone booth. Sometimes he loses his balance, but when he's engaged, he has that wrestling background. He has that size. He'll wrestle you down. He'll pry open the hole. He can pull a little bit as well, but it's not someone that I would say is overly athletic. This guy is your definition of a brawler, 6'5", 325. He's going to have a long list of suitors. One team that's been linked to him, just kind of speculation, Michigan. They were a contender for him out of high school. He's from Detroit. Michigan's always looking to add to their offensive line room. That's a potential fit there. The other big name, Pat Coogan. This is a starting center for Notre Dame. 6'5", 310, from Chicago, 3-star out of the class of 2021. Lost his starting job to Ashton Craig. There's a Coogan start. Sorry, Coogan started at guard, right, last year. Loses his starting job to Pendleton, like I mentioned. Moves to center, backs up Ashton Craig. Ashton Craig gets hurt. Coogan gets in the starting lineup and has a really good year. Almost, some people called him the heartbeat of the offensive line. He was a leader. He had a famous phrase of 4 quarters of FU football, which he would say. His pregame speeches became pretty legendary. 8 pressures throughout the season, only 1 sack, 79 pass blocking grade. That's second on the team behind Schroth. Was able to get to the second level at times. I watched him again against Louisville. Great size and length at the center position because he is previously a starting guard for Notre Dame, so he's bigger than your average center. Can get to the second level. Just really a physically gifted center prospect, not a first round type physically gifted, but somebody that brings some size and looks the part coming off the bus at that position. Teams that I think are going to be lining up for these guys. I mentioned Michigan earlier when it comes to Spindler because of the location and the relationship there. I got to think, if I'm Oklahoma or if I'm USC and I'm protecting my quarterback that I'm building around, whether it's Mayava for USC or John Mateer for Oklahoma, they need experienced, high-quality offensive linemen. USC lost two really, really good ones to the portal. Manuel Pregna, Mason Murphy out the door. They needed those guys. They weren't even that good last year as a unit, so they need to get better. Oklahoma, one of the worst offensive lines in the country. They've signed some young players. They need more. Those are two teams. This is hypothetical that I'd be, if I'm those two teams, I am putting a huge premium on either of these two guys to come in and bring some championship level experience and quality to that room.
Yeah, you saw that tweet that I just had up there from Pete Sampson saying that Coogan, whether he started or not, would have been a captain most likely on this team next season. So you can't imagine that Marcus Freeman is too happy about these losses. I mean, I said it the other day that I didn't think that they'd lose too many guys here, but I was wrong on this part. And again, it's a very deep room, right? So I know there's going to be some Notre Dame fans that pop in here in the comments section that say, look, we're not concerned about it. But it is just something to watch because they played so much football, and that depth is kind of what made them be able to do what they did, because a lot of these guys stepped up in situations where guys were hurt and things of that nature. But you lose three of them that played a lot of football, and you got to replace them now and bring in guys who haven't played as much football who are going to be backing them up. And just as we're on here as well, another one entered the portal, reserve lineman Ty Chan. So he was a big recruit in the 2022 class. So he was more of a reserve guy, was a deep reserve, so wasn't even in the too deep this year. But another guy there from the offensive line gone.
Yeah, that's a good opportunity for maybe, what about like a UNLV, who we talk about a lot on the show. We got Sergeant Mayhew in the chat, so I know he's always focused on UNLV. A team like that, I could see taking a chance on a Ty Chan just because that body type, the fact that he's been coached so well. He's a class of 22 kid, so he has experience, may not in games, but he's an older player. I could see him maybe going to the G5 level and finding a role there, but he could also maybe get opportunities at the P4. This is a position, whether it's guard or tackle, that he ultimately suits up at, that you're always looking for help there. They're always going to find a spot for somebody with this body type, this pedigree. He's played in games, mostly on special teams, but still somebody who's played in games. I could see him being somebody that gets a nice little bounce back. UNLV.
He's a Massachusetts kid, so it's across the country. Maybe a BC,
Boston College, yeah.
BC with Bill O'Brien. They've been trying to rebuild the trenches there as well. We understand the sort of football they want to play, so maybe that's the move. But I'm sure UNLV would be very interested.
But look, Ashton, if you're Notre Dame, these are not good developments because these are players that are good players that helped you with depth. As you mentioned, Pete, depth got Notre Dame to this point. If they didn't have the offensive line depth that they had with all the injuries they had, they never would have been playing for a championship. But these are not guaranteed starters by any means. Again, you think about Billy Schrouth, who went down. When he came back, he walked right into the starting lineup. Think of Anthony Knapp. You think about Charles Jagasaw, who, like I mentioned, is considered a rising star. Gerby Lambert, really, really talented tackle. Ashton Craig was the starting center, so he'll slide right back into that starting center spot. Probably would have beaten out Coogan anyways, based on their prior battle. So not like a total nightmare for Notre Dame here, but it's never good to lose quality players with experience. This is going to really set the portal market, I think, on fire for the next couple of days, because these type of players are at a premium, and pretty much any team in the country that's not Notre Dame with their depth is going to spend big to get this kind of guys.
Well, and there's probably some coaches, some offensive line coaches across the country who are looking at these guys and saying, man, I thought I was good at guard or center here. And then these guys popped up and said, man, but this guy would be an upgrade over what I have right now. And it kind of throws a wrench into things a bit there. But
yeah, and King God's asking, does Miami reach out to one of them for the left guard position and compete with McCoy? It's a very interesting question. I mean, McCoy is very highly regarded internally. Matthew McCoy at Miami, they think he's an NFL type player. But I mean, you can never have enough offensive linemen. The question I had when I saw this was, if Coogan was on the market earlier, would Miami knock on after James Brockermeyer? But there's going to be a lot of teams in this mix. And again, the teams that really, really jump out to me are, this is no information. This is just who needs these kind of guys. Oklahoma, trying to rebuild the worst offensive line in the SEC, which is crazy to say about a team like Oklahoma, but That's where they were last year. You can't just rely on the young guys, the Michael Fasusis of the world. You recruited great. You need veterans. I can see Oklahoma getting involved here, and USC. You've invested a lot in Jaden Mayava. You got one of the best young quarterbacks as far as high school in the country in Hussein Longstreet. You got to play offensive line better than you did last year, especially if you want to throw it down the field. Both of these guys would really, really help either of those programs.
And look, I last thing on this, but I said it before, they go on the road to Miami week 1. So you're going to have a whole new communication, thing going on there with all the new faces. And look, there's going to be a lot of offensive lines across the country that deal with the same thing week 1. It's not a Notre Dame specific issue. We know that there's going to be talent there, but again, we'll see how it all meshes early on.
Yep. And before we move on to the next topic, Pete, we got a question from Debo's Backpack saying, I know it's only January, but looking at Carolina's schedule for 2025, can we get a prediction what you think their record will be? I think I will wait on all the predictions until we see maybe spring, right? Especially the quarterback position for North Carolina is so unsettled. I mean, really everything is unsettled for North Carolina because they got so many new faces, particularly the quarterback position. If they go with Bryce Baker, it's going to be a learning curve for him. But, looking at North Carolina's schedule, that first game against TCU, you remember when Deion Sanders first took over for Colorado, his win over TCU kind of put them on the map that they wouldn't be a total joke. North Carolina is not starting where Colorado did. Of course, they were a bowl team last year, but that to me just jumps out as a statement game. Also, UCF, tough team to play out of conference, especially on the road. They really do have a nice home field advantage. At UCF, they got Scott Frost back there. I can see these two games are the ones I'm watching. And then ACC, that's always up and down. It's hard to predict the ACC. You lose some, you expect to lose, or you expect to win. You win some, you expect to lose. Of course, the schedule on paper is not too tough. You're avoiding the Miamis of the world.
Florida State, Clemson.
Well, you're playing Clemson.
I mean, Louisville. Sorry, Louisville, I don't know why I said Clemson.
Yeah,
I meant Louisville. I was looking at their helmet.
Yeah. You're avoiding Louisville.
Virginia Tech, no Virginia Tech with Kyron Drones.
But you got to go to the Carrier Dome. Again, it's so hard. Some of these games, Carrier Dome didn't seem that tough until you saw how great Syracuse played last year. So
NC State, they lost a lot defensively, but then CJ Bailey's back. He could take a huge leap at quarterback and become one of the best in the country. We're both high on his potential. So
yeah, it's early. I'll say this. I'm not trying to cop out. I want to see what the quarterback looks like in spring. We'll be watching that closely, and we'll be providing daily spring practice updates from across the country on Group Chat Sports. Again, like and subscribe. We got over how many we got on
almost
live?
60 live right now.
Almost 60.
Good.
Appreciate everybody joining and commenting.
And remember, guys, ask questions. In the comments. We have topics that we have to get to, but of course, any questions that we can kind of ask on the answer on the fly here, we will.
All right, Pete, what we got?
Let's get to recruiting. High school recruiting. We've talked, some portal here. We've talked Belichick signing, but recruiting wise, there was some big moves if you're a Washington State fan yesterday, as they flipped a whole bunch of former South Dakota State commits, and they have 7 commits in the span of 24 hours, including 3 offensive linemen. So again, this is Jimmy Rogers, coming over from South Dakota State and flipping a lot of guys that were in his class over there. 11 flips in terms of high school players in this class. So he's trusting these evaluations that he made over there and banking on a lot of these guys coming over and being able to take the jump to the FBS level here.
Yeah, plus the 14 transfers in the portal. To me, this is going to be really interesting. First of all, Washington State with Zevi Eckhouse is going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch. It's been an interesting team in general when you think about Washington State and what they've gone through leaving the Pac-12, but they've been somewhat relevant in that their quarterback last year, maybe the number 1 overall pick of the draft this year for the Miami Hurricanes. You look at John Mateer, kind of set the portal on fire when he entered there. They did play pretty good football this year, Washington State, their first year out of the Pac-12. So there's been shuffling. Their coach goes over to Wake Forest, but now you have a proven national champion coming in. And before we get to some of these players, the big impression I get and the name that keeps jumping out, the example that keeps jumping out, Kurt Cignetti, James Madison to Indiana, taking so many of his players and recruits with him from James Madison, Indiana. course, James Madison had already jumped from FCS to FBS, so it's not a perfect analogy. But look, we're talking about the Big Ten versus where Washington State is playing, however you want to call the Pac-12. So the jump's not as big in terms of where you're going. And the key to, I think, Cignetti's success is he installed his system, and he had a lot of players that understood what he wanted to do and had a lot to prove. They had chips on their shoulders. These were not like 5-star guys that were kind of disappointed and you're just stacking them. These were guys that are good players already. You know what they can do on the football field. Now it's about taking that to a different level and seeing if they can level up and trusting in their ability to level up. So I like the concept of taking a winning formula in South Dakota State, national champion, powerhouse, taking that winning formula and just transporting it to the FBS level. You got a quarterback in Zevi Eckhouse, who, by the way, he was an FCS guy who ended up moving up a level and showing what he could do in the bowl game. He would have had a lot of Power 4 interest if he would have stayed in the portal. So just an interesting approach and a lot of interesting players in this high school class.
And we'll start here with an offensive lineman. I mentioned 3 of these guys that they picked up were offensive linemen. And this first one here has NFL lineage, as Jordan Cunningham, the son of former NFL lineman Rick Cunningham, 6'6" out of Brophy Prep, 6'6", 280 out of Brophy Prep out there in Phoenix, Arizona. And he plays primarily right tackle, as you can see here on the huddle tape. Had Bowling Green offer, Eastern Washington, Idaho, New Mexico. So the offer list doesn't blow you away. 3-star, 6'6", 280. But you're betting on the size here, obviously, and then NFL lineage, as you see, again, son of former NFL lineman Rick Cunningham.
Yeah, I love this one. I mean, you talk about the length at 6'6", 280. The body type's actually perfect for talking about Power 4. He's got twitch in his body. He's got a nice stance. He's flexible. It pops out of it. He needs to add strength, but that's what the weight room is for. I think if you're at Washington State, you're banking on some development. That's what you did at South Dakota. Look at this.
That looked good there, yeah.
Yeah, look at the quickness to get out there. And then, of course, bloodlines, that usually bodes well in terms of future projection when the guy already has some level of production and talent. So I love this one. I think this is definitely a Division I player, an FBS player. And it's the kind of guy that you could see down the road. He's 320, right? And the athleticism's translating. I mean, look at the athleticism there. I got to say, I'm shocked that this guy was at one point an FCS player.
There's a couple other guys like that in this list too. So again, this is an evaluation job. You mentioned Kurt Cignetti. I got a lot of guys he brought over from JMU that ended up working out well.
Yeah, and look, if you're winning the championships like he is at South Dakota State, you're a good evaluator. I mean, it's not like, you don't forget how to be an evaluator when you jump levels. So the fact that this guy has some good evaluations doesn't shock me, because that's part of what he's done at a lower level, right? I mean, he's finding guys that can help you win national championships. Defensive guy, but clearly has some eye for offense with this pickup.
So we'll stay on the offensive line here, and we will go to Trevor Bindle from Liberty, Missouri, an interior offensive lineman. He plays, as you'll see here on the clips, he's a guy who plays left tackle in high school. He's definitely going to be an interior guy, I would say, at the next level. Looks really strong. Looks like a good downhill run blocker. And as you'll see here, plays a lot in the snow here, so he's going to be ready for that weather in Pullman.
Look at that, man. Looks like Florida right now, Pensacola. Yeah. Size. One thing about the Dakotas, right? We'll just say the Dakota programs in the FCS is they really do have some nice size players. You've seen them put linemen in the first round of the NFL, second round of the NFL. Spencer Brown, when you watch the Buffalo Bills play this weekend at right tackle. So guys in that level, at the higher levels, when you talk about those Western teams, where Dakotas, Montana, you name it, they do have some big kids. That's what the area produces. There's guys with size there. A lot of times they have big kids that are skinny that gain weight, or just physically mature. So the fact that both of these guys are over 6'4" with developmental upside, that fits what you'd expect. And I think that's going to be something that surprises people in the future with Washington State, is I think the trenches and the physicality is going to be more than we've seen with that program, which has been really a quarterback-driven program going back through Mike Leach, right? When was the last time Washington State was big and physical up front I think that's something you're going to see change here with the new regime coming from South Dakota State.
So the next guy we'll talk about here is a tight end, Josh Weddle from Minnesota. One of the guys that he flipped over from South Dakota State. 6'5", 235. Army, Cornell, North Dakota State, Ohio offers, and just some specs on him. You just heard the Cornell offer. 4.0 GPA, 32 score on his ACT. Squats 500, cleans 285, bench 275, 34-inch vertical. And you see here a lot of blocking across the formation in his tape here. Also plays defensive end as well, long arms. So a good-looking two-way player here, but looks like he's slated to play tight end at the next level.
Yeah, and look, we'll see where he ends up, because we've seen these guys, particularly when you talk about the Midwest and the West, some of these tight ends that become defensive ends, defensive tackles, even in some cases. But he'll get a chance at tight end, and I see a physical identity kind of running through all these players, and it's such a change for Washington State from the Mike Leach air raid to Cam Ward, where you really had one of the worst running games in the country with one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Great receivers as well at Washington State. We don't talk enough about the Joshua Kellys of the world, the Kyle Williams, Stripling. I mean, they've had guys that go to the Power 4 level and put up huge numbers, 1,000-yard receivers at that level, caliber receivers at that level. So it's an identity shift, but I think it's a smart identity shift. And you got to be who you are. You got to be who got you to that point. And Jimmy Rogers is doing that. He's a defensive-minded guy anyway, so he is hard-nosed, and he's going to get players that fit that profile.
So let's stick with some of these physical guys up front here and go back to the offensive line as Dylan Hildebrand, another flip that happened here, 6'4", 300-pounder from Wisconsin. As I pull up the huddle tape here, really a big fan of this guy. To me, out of the linemen, I think he looks maybe the best out of all of them that we've seen here. And again, coming from Wisconsin, Verona area high school, and you see some of the stuff here. First team All State, for two-time first team All Conference, but you see him here at right tackle.
Yeah, physical. That jumps out right away.
And good feet, man. It really looks like he has good feet.
Even these interior linemen, you see them playing tackle, which is a good sign. The strength is there. And I think one thing that if you're coming from South Dakota State, you're not running away from development. Look at the finish, driving him.
But he gets to he got to the second level pretty quickly there. So I'm a fan of his.
Yeah, and look, he's not the most physically developed guy right now, but you could see the frame of someone who will eventually be that. You see him get out there in front with some athleticism. And that's what I'm saying. Is South Dakota State, these guys a lot of times are 5th year, 6th year guys before they really go. So they're used to being a developmental program. That's part of their DNA. And I think even if you go to a place like Washington State, you still got to be committed to development. You have to worry about the portal and things like that, which are a little different, guys trying to take your players. But when you get guys with length, guys that are nasty, and this guy's finishing ability is outstanding, clearly, there's something to work with to develop.
Yeah, and he had some solid. He was a three-star recruit, number 26 player in the state of Wisconsin, Ball State, New Mexico, Northern Illinois, which is a program that always seems to find some good under the cover talent. So yeah, I'm excited to see how he develops there. All these guys seem to be really solid pickups.
Yeah, no, I'm intrigued by the move here. Honestly, more with Dicker going to Wake Forest, that's going to be an interesting move to watch with the success they've had with the passing game. But this Washington State to me became even more interesting just because of trying to see how this system, which has been so successful, works as you elevate. Look, you've seen it with Kleiman at Kansas State. I mean, it can be done if you're a good coach and you stick to what you know and you get players that fit what you do.
Now, keeping it moving here. Appreciate everyone who's on. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. This is Group Chat Football Live, our daily live college football show. A few more guys to get to here as, again, Washington State really cleaned up here in the high school ranks. And this one is my favorite guy out of all. And we've talked about the offensive lineman and the tight end there, but we're going to get to a player who was really wanted by some bigger programs here, Sullivan Schlimgen, from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And you're looking at a guy here who was wanted badly over the summer by Texas Tech, number 4 player in the state of South Dakota. And to me, I'm showing you the defensive highlights right now, but we'll show some offensive highlights too. A physical inside linebacker here who can run a little bit, but really not afraid to get his nose dirty. You see him twitched up here, making some of these plays behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. The twitch. South Dakota, these places, they have athletes, man.
Look at this, though.
I know that's big time. And some of these guys that sometimes they play other sports. They're not.
He's a baseball guy too.
They're not going to camps, but you see the athletes that come out of there. I am extremely impressed by the twitch of this guy, and he's playing linebacker, so it's not like he's just out there rushing the passer or doing something that you have to project. He's playing linebacker. Jimmy Rogers, defensive head coach, so he loves this player and has plans for him. It's going to be interesting to watch this guy in the Pac-2, and I really want to see what Washington State does next year, because they lost a lot to the portal, but they're getting so many players and so much new identity, along with a quarterback that I won't say he's proven because he hasn't started a whole year. He's coming from a pipeline that's been pretty productive, and he looked really, really good in the bowl.
I'm pulling up his offensive highlights here real quick, but he's playing running back. He's playing receiver. He's really, he's doing it all here, but you can see why Texas Tech wanted him.
Yeah. I think of a Jack Campbell. I'm not saying he's that caliber of player, but just a multi-sport athlete from that Midwest area, from the West, with great athleticism, great tenacity, not a huge recruit coming out, but then you get him in your program for a few years and he's just a monster. And look, we talked about, we like our linebackers to play both ways, just having a feel for offense, feel for seeing holes, doing what he can do. He is very, very,
look at this.
He's very, very talented. Yeah. Look at that open field. Yeah. Running backs.
I mean, they use him as like a receiver tight end there. Look at him like playing quarterback here.
Well, look, he sees the hole. So when you're a quarterback, like a wildcat quarterback or a running back, and you're seeing the holes and having vision, at a linebacker, that vision just flips and you're seeing the same holes develop just from the other side. So it's always nice to see guys that can do it with the ball in their hands that project as linebackers, because they have that natural feel for traffic.
Sebastian Vera asks if he looks like Tebow or Hurts out there.
Yeah, my favorite comparison. I'm not ready to go there yet. But
look at that, though. I'm telling you, man. I'm all in on Sullivan Schlimgen.
He's got some speed. I'd love to see what his track times are, because he can really go.
Yeah, he can go, and he's, again, like I said, baseball guy as well. And
there he looked like Tebow right there.
He definitely does. He definitely does. So a couple more guys to get to here. As impressive list, man. I think as we've continued to go along here, I've gotten more and more impressed by what they've picked up. And by the rankings, this is the highest ranked one of them all. And that's Aramis Wright out of Country Club Hills, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. Looks like a guy with some legit speed. You see him here taking the jet sweep across the formation, and look at him go. He plays a little bit of everything: receiver, running back, nickel, safety, and to me, probably, an absolute steal. Had offers from Ole Miss, Michigan State last year in the springtime. So a guy that I just don't understand why more schools weren't on him at this point.
Yeah, and look, we'll see what position he ends up at. Washington State's had success at both corner and receiver. You think of Ethan O'Connor, the young corner, transferred to Miami. Georgia was hot on his trail. Really, really impressive player that Washington State was able to evaluate. Yeah, you see him on offense. This is a guy who, if you look at Washington State, and I know it's a different coaching staff, but Josh Kelly, Stripling, Kyle Williams, these were all big-time college receivers. Maybe that's just a thing where that's what programs got an act for it. South Dakota State, not the same type of program when it comes to producing receivers, so that's going to be an adjustment. How do you use a talented guy like this? Do you put him on defense, or is Jimmy Rogers going to open his horizons now that he's playing with a higher level of athlete and able to recruit guys like this? But obviously, he's bringing them over from the Jackrabbits commitment list, so he had an idea and a vision for how he wanted to use the player. But the speed is going to be a welcome addition for a team that needs some juice.
And then the last one here, because we can't forget our kickers, of course, Adlai Loonsberry. So this is a guy who was yet another South Dakota State commit. What a name. here. You always get some interesting names.
Yeah, I think you just put him on the list because you wanted to say his name.
I did definitely want to say his name, but look, he was a 7th commit here, and interesting with him, as he's expected to be on a partial scholarship, the first player at Washington State to be on a partial scholarship, which is part of the new expansion to 105 scholarships. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work out, but he's someone, again, committed to SDSU and multi-sport guy, soccer player, baseball player, and football as well. I was looking at some of the numbers. He wasn't perfect in terms of extra points, but 6'4", 195, and maybe betting on the athlete here. We saw at Miami years ago, Michael Badgley was a guy who didn't have much kicking experience, was really an athlete, and then got to kicking late and ended up, making a great NFL career out of it for himself. This could be a guy with more upside than just like polish as a kicker at this point.
Yeah, and I think the real interesting thing here is that partial scholarship. We've seen this in baseball and college baseball, where a lot of guys are on partial scholarship, and you sort of break it up and add it up to get your roster. We'll see if that happens in football. Positions like kicker, maybe it's easier to bring in a kicker on a partial scholarship than, like, for example, a defensive tackle, right? Just historically, kickers are a little easier to get in that way. So there we go.
We might, we're risking losing some viewership here. We're going to throw some kicker highlights up here.
There you go. But I think really, that partial scholarship to me is interesting to see how it goes, how it's used going forward. This 105 is going to be something to watch, and we'll keep track of it every day on Group Chat Football Live to see how people are using it, what tricks people are using to make sure they have the best roster they can have while also not going overboard on the budget.
Yeah, so impressive pickups there for Washington State. If you're a Cougars fan, you've got to be excited. It's been a tough couple of years losing big-time names in the portal. And look, these are guys who were very loyal, obviously, to Coach Rogers. So maybe you can get them in there and develop them for a few years and start to build something really, really good over there. So we'll wrap things up with one more high school commit that just happened, and that is Illinois landing 3-star wide receiver Kenyan Alston, 6'2", 185. And you see there in the picture, he's got some bulk to him. So you're looking at a guy here who's still a year away, 2026 class, coming from a big program in Orlando, Bishop Moore and Brett Bielema. They've been on a nice little run here. They were just in Orlando for their bowl game, so maybe a bit of a connection there. Maybe he was at the game, maybe he was watching it. But a nice early pickup offensively here for Illinois.
Yeah, that bowl game, a Citrus Bowl, really had an impact beyond just the win, because you had 3 Central Florida kids in attendance that ended up going to Illinois. Kenyan Alston from Orlando, Michael Clayton, the quarterback, who I really like. I've seen him up close, from Seminole. He was in attendance. And then Kingston Shaw from Apopka, which is right there outside Orlando, is where Warren Sapp is from. It's where Jalen Carter is from. If you saw him in the playoffs, Kingston Shaw committed to Illinois. So 3 very nice Central Florida prospects joining Illinois' class. You look at Alston, the player, first thing that jumps out is his size. He's not playing the biggest level of competition at Bishop Moore Catholic, but still Florida competition. 48 receptions, 970 yards, 14 touchdowns, number 83 receiver in the class, over 20 offers. You got Power 4 offers from Missouri, West Virginia, Syracuse, Baylor, FSU, Iowa, Iowa State, Minnesota, and more. And really, according to Alston, this came down to Justin Stepp. He said he was looking for development. He can get some early playing time, get well and develop there with how he's developed. I feel like he's just a loving guy, very welcoming, like family. So he's very high on Coach Stepp. And if you're talking about the developmental history of receivers at Illinois, all you got to do is look at Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, both NFL guys to me. If they're not drafted, they'll be in camps. You also had 2 NFL receivers last year with Casey Washington, Isaiah Williams. So the track record is there at Illinois to play wide receiver. Pat Bryant, another big guy from the state of Florida. But really, to me, the thing that catches my eye is your quarterback and your receiver in this class already know each other, and Michael Clayton and Kenyan Alston already have a little bit of a relationship. They can really throw together after the high school season ends and getting ready for Illinois, because they live right next to each other. And I know we're talking about Alston, who you just watch. You see the size. Kind of looks like Pat Bryant a little bit size-wise.
Good yard after catch ability.
Oh, yeah. And you see the ability to track the ball. He's from Florida, so he's catching footballs year-round. But the guy that really intrigues me from this Orlando area class is Michael Clayton, somebody that I saw in person at a camp down here in Miami. He is a big, big quarterback. Definitely got Big Ten size. He's got a powerful arm, and now he's got a receiver with some size that he knows very well. He was sitting right next to Alston, watching Illinois win that Citrus Bowl. There's a program that's going to be getting some preseason top 10 buzz. You're already seeing it start to percolate. So this recruiting class, they're probably going to have an opportunity to recruit at a level beyond what they've done in a long, long time, because they had that buzz behind them. They had that energy. They had that, the hype, right? And they're going to have most of this class in the bag before they even play a game. So whether they live up to the hype or not, that hype is going to help carry them. And, you talk about Florida football and Illinois. They've had a lot of success in the state of Florida. Talk about the Devin Witherspoon, the Pro Bowler from Pensacola area, which is under snow right now, which is crazy. And then Kirby Joseph, who's from right there in Orlando, Florida, one of the best players at the safety position in the NFL, Illinois grad from around this way. So it makes sense for Illinois to kind of put a circle around this area and say, hey, you guys saw us win our 10th game in person or on TV, and now we're going to come get some of your best players.
Man, we really appreciate the support today. The numbers have been awesome. We love the comments, the questions while we're on here live. It really makes it extra fun for us interacting with you all. And man, we're gonna keep this thing going. Group Chat Football Live. The portal is closing now, but as we see, the news has not stopped and will not. Going to be interesting to see where these Notre Dame linemen end up. Against Sam Pendleton already getting crystal balls at Tennessee. But then these other two guys that entered today are going to be big-time commodities on the market. So we'll keep you updated here. Group Chat Football Live. Thank you all for watching. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you, Sergeant Morhew, as always, for hopping on here with us. See you guys tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.